like being in a cult or a violent relationship.
Highly toxic. They use scare tactics to keep you quiet.
I am ashamed to say I work for the Nursing and Midwifery Council.
I think it should be razed to the ground.
It's far from a vote of confidence by those who work for the Nursing and Midwifery Council, a health watchdog that's meant to regulate nurses and midwives to keep the public safe. The comments are part of a damning review into what's described as a toxic culture.
People were not sleeping, hair was falling out, they were in tears, they were distraught. They literally found themselves in a place, quite frankly, that they shouldn't be. And they didn't seem to have a way out. The fact that they were able finally to share their stories with us is a good thing, but they didn't feel safe to speak up.
The review also found a backlog of more than 6,000 fitness to practice cases, nurses waiting often for years for a decision on their future.
What's particularly shocking is just how serious some of these allegations are. The male nurse accused of raping his colleague, another accused of viewing the most serious category of child pornography. But because those alleged incidents happened outside work, they weren't investigated initially by the NMC.
7 years after the NMC first received complaints about the rape, the nurse was finally struck off.
It was the thing that struck me most was that the public aren't safe.
Could there be another Lucy Letby buried in the backlog of investigations?
It's no doubt in my mind that there are nurses facing very serious allegations who are stuck in a system which will take several years to address, and that means that many of them will still be able to function, carry out routine activities, potentially put public at risk. I'm afraid that's not acceptable.
In another shocking revelation, the review found that 6 nurses under investigation, in some cases for minor offences, had taken their own lives in the last year.
I've dealt with and overseen about 1 million prosecutions during my career. I stretched my mind back and I found one person who took their life whilst being in investigation. So that's one person under investigation in 1 million cases. Here they have 6,000 cases and they have 6 people who've taken their lives. That is a clear cause for concern.
For Michelle Russell, the news that 6 nurses have taken their own lives is all too close to home.
I'm surprised I'm not number 7, to be honest. I mean, the last year particularly has been horrendous.
Michelle first referred a male colleague to the NMC in 2016, alleging he'd sexually assaulted her. She had to wait 8 years for the regulator to hold a fitness to practice hearing. She's welcomed today's review.
I feel heard. I hope people understand why I've battled on about this, why I've been a pain in the backside to a lot of people. I hope people understand that. There's no pleasure in any of this. I'm glad people are seeing the truth because that's what will protect the public. The public need to know.
Whistleblowers have played a vital role in trying to hold the NMC to account. One who's a senior manager there says she raised safeguarding concerns with her bosses last year. Worried she could lose her job for speaking to Channel 4 News, she's asked to remain anonymous. So here she's represented by an actress.
The response was denial, gaslighting. They dismissed my concerns and they've intimidated me to fall in line with how it runs. There's a hierarchy of individuals. They demonstrate incompetence and bullying behaviour and it goes right to the top.
Now the Queen's Nursing Institute charity has echoed the review's findings. In a letter to the new Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, it says the nursing profession has lost confidence in the MMC and no longer believes that it can safeguard the public. Ministers will now meet the NMC, according to the Department of Health. Meanwhile, the long wait for an outcome in her case has meant Michelle Russell has lost the job she loved. Now there are calls for those at the top of the regulator to lose their jobs too.
Well, joining me now is the Chair of Nursing and Midwifery Council, Sir David Warren. Thank you very much for joining us. Some really serious allegations there, absolutely damning. I wanted to draw your attention to the 6 suicides or suspected suicides. We know that each of these cases are very complex, but one mother has blamed the NMC for her daughter's death. What do you say to the parents and families who think that you're responsible?
Well, good evening, Aisha. And can I start by saying how profoundly sorry I am to the families of those nurses who died by suicide, either during or after a fitness to practice process. Every suicide is an avoidable personal tragedy, and I feel profoundly shocked by Nazir Afzal's report and by the detailed review he has taken into our fitness to practice processes and our staff culture. In the case of the 6 nurses who died by suicide, we await the coroner's inquests in the majority of cases, and we wait to see what recommendations the coroner will make. And we will, of course, take those forward as urgently as possible. But the most important thing for us to do is to focus on the impact that our fitness to practice processes, which are far too protracted, I accept the review in its entirety, the impact that they have on the people caught up in them, the registrants, especially the most vulnerable, and the staff of the NMC.
They are indeed very long. I mean, you have a backlog of around 6,000 cases. And I want to draw your attention to another case, which Jane mentioned in her report as well. One nurse was accused of sexually assaulting a patient, raping a colleague by spiking their drink. The case was closed initially because the rape was done outside work. The sexual assault was done outside work. How comfortable are you with that decision process?
Well, I'm not at all comfortable with the initial decision that was taken, which was clearly wrong. And it was reviewed and reopened by the assistant registrar. The case, as you say, took far too long to come to closure. But it is important to point out that the nurse in question was subject to an interim order for most of the period that took place before the case was concluded. I'm not defending for a second the fact that it took 7 years to conclude this case with striking off.
Was the person who made that initial, sorry to cut across you, was the person who made that initial case, were they reprimanded? Were they given a disciplinary for that decision-making, which you admit is flawed?
Well, that decision was taken in 2017, which is some years before I became chair of the NMC, and I'm afraid I can't answer your specific question. But the important thing is that we must speed up our processes, and we have also amended our guidance to our teams to ensure that there is no distinction between the personal life and the professional life of our registrants. There shouldn't be any ambiguity on that point, and there won't be from now on.
One of the big issues that was raised was racism. A staff member explained being brought into a meeting with the CEO. Dozen black colleagues were brought in. They were asked to take a selfie and then told a whole load of promises. 2 years later, half of them had left. Do you really take inclusion and diversity seriously in that organisation?
We do. We take it with maximum seriousness.
Really?
But I have to say how sorry I am, not only to the registrants, as I've said, but to our staff, that their lived experience reflects dysfunctionality, and this is graphically demonstrated in Nazir's report, which should not be the case in our regulator. Now, we accept all the recommendations that Nazir Afzal has given us, and they include a number of recommendations on equality, diversity and inclusion, which will involve diversifying the executive board.
Just last, sorry to cut across you, just lastly and briefly, will you resign? You've been in a chair since 2021. Are you going to resign as a result of these damning conclusions that's been raised by this report?
I have a job to do to take these recommendations forward, and I think stability is important as we do that. I shared a platform this morning on another media outlet with Nazir, who was kind enough to say that he had confidence in the Council of the NMC and their commitment to taking forward his recommendations. I want to earn that trust and confidence by ensuring that this is a turning point for the organisation and that we reform fundamentally, and we will.
Sir David Warren, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.